Last federal election, she won her riding of Burlington, Ontario, ousting a long-time incumbent. She's a recent addition to Justin Trudeau's cabinet.
I, Karina Gould, do solemnly and sincerely promise and declare.
And the youngest female minister in Canadian history.
Those of you that don't know me, I grew up in Burlington. I actually went to school with Mayor Goldring's daughter from grade 1 to grade 12. We went to Clarksdale, Rolling Meadows, and M.M. Robinson High School. After graduation, I moved down to Mexico, where I learned Spanish, and I volunteered in an orphanage. And then I went to McGill in Montreal, where I studied political science and Latin American studies. I started my career working in Washington, D.C. at the Organization of American States, which is similar to the United Nations, but just for the Western Hemisphere. I then did a master's degree at the University of Oxford in England, and came back to Canada, where I worked for the Mexican government in their trade office in Toronto before entering politics.
So obviously that background has contributed to your appointment as the Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of International Development.
We continue to have the freedoms and the rights that we have, whether it's democracy, the human rights, free speech, etc., that we don't have to, that in 50 years we don't say we lost those things. I think Canadians do have an understanding of what the democratic rights are that we hold. I'm not sure that they're necessarily connecting that with the charter and the document that we have. So I do think it's important for us to continually be, reflecting on how we got to where we are today. I mean, one of the things that I always admire and appreciate about Canadians is that we take these, we have these expectations that these rights and freedoms are guaranteed, and I think that that's important, but we also have to make sure that we're conscious of the fact that we have these rights and freedoms, and that we're constantly working to protect them, to make sure that we continue to have them, not just today, but into the future as well. My job is to strengthen and protect our democratic institutions and ensure they represent the values of Canadians. We are moving to accomplish that mandate. When I was appointed to Cabinet about a year ago by the Prime Minister, one of the key parts of my mandate was cybersecurity and elections. And over the past year, we've learned a lot about what that means. I think that we should be, moving to make sure that those principles of free speech, those principles of, being able to access information in a transparent manner, are being upheld. We want to make sure that we still have that freedom of speech here in Canada, but there are limits, and we have to understand what are credible threats. Canadians are getting a lot of their news from Facebook, from Google, from Twitter, from other social media platforms.
Well, what do you think?
Should they are information arbiters, right?
Right.
They are, really kind of defining what Canadians see and how they see it and when they see it. And so those are the conversations that I'm having with them.
It's a big impact on democracy. What can you actually... Are you going to Bigfoot them if they don't do something?
Well, so where we are right now is we want to see internal changes happening within the companies. The tricky part is because they're, outside of the regulations at the moment. We have no way of actually confirming whether those have happened.
You can change the rules.
But that's also a possibility.
Are you threatening to say if they don't do what you want them to do, you'll legislate it?
I think that we will work together and we'll hopefully see some action on their part.
Is that a yes? So you'll legislate if you have to?
Well, there's been a lot of work with parliamentarians, both here in Canada and around the world, and Canadians are looking at this issue too, and they have certain expectations.
But you should be able to tell me that. You can tell me that. Are you prepared to legislate them if they don't do what you ask them to do?
We haven't been afraid to before. We haven't been afraid to legislate social media thus far. We are entering into conversations. I've initiated those conversations about what we are expecting. The first thing is that if they have actions that they're taking in other jurisdictions to protect their elections, so for example, the upcoming parliamentary elections in the EU, we expect that they implement those measures here in Canada.
Our committee has recommended imposing a duty on social media platforms to remove manifestly illegal content in a timely fashion, including hate speech, harassment, and disinformation, or risk monetary sanctions. And I just want to read a comment. This was in response to a media article about the hate and threats from the Yellow Vest movement. They said, Trudeau is a traitor to our country and deserves to be hung for his treasonous crimes. And that's posted on Facebook, that's left on Facebook. Facebook doesn't take it down. So should we expect social media companies to act, or should we require them to act?
I think that we are moving in a direction where we need to require social media companies to act. We are right now, as an international community, but also here in Canada, trying to understand the depth and the breadth of the issue and to come up with solutions that will attack the core of the problem. Canada's next federal election is set for this October. In recent years, elections around the world have been targeted by both cyber and non-cyber attacks. Allies such as the United States, the UK, France, and Germany have all experienced degrees of foreign interference in recent elections. Ces attaques malveillantes sont parfois si bien masquées qu'elles sont difficiles à détecter. Elles menacent aussi d'affaiblir notre confiance dans notre système et nos processus démocratiques. We cannot allow this trust to be broken. I want to assure Canadians that our government is prepared and has a plan to defend our election against threats. We have deliberated across many government departments, as well as with the major political parties. We have been watching and learning from the experience of others, making our own assessments, and have developed a plan that will protect Canada's election. Our plan has 4 areas of action: combating foreign interference, strengthening organizational readiness, expecting social media platforms to act, enhancing citizen preparedness. Mr. Goodale has touched on the role that social media plays in our democratic process. Les plateformes numériques telles que Facebook, Twitter et Google sont devenues des espaces importants pour la tenue des débats démocratiques. However, these platforms have been manipulated to spread disinformation and create confusion, which has the potential to disengage people in the democratic process. We are concerned about the risk online manipulation poses to the integrity of our election. We expect social media platforms to take concrete actions to help safeguard this fall's election by promoting transparency, authenticity, and integrity on their platforms. I have initiated conversations with the social media platforms to identify these actions. As a starting point, we are looking for a commitment from social media companies to implement changes here in Canada that they have already applied in other countries. To help build those skills, we are dedicating $7 million towards digital, news, and civic literacy programming that will help Canadians critically assess news reporting and editorials, know how and when malicious actors exploit online platforms, and acquire skills on how to avoid being susceptible to online manipulation by malicious actors. Our considerations included when and how Canadians should be informed, and by whom. Our goal was to find the right way to instill confidence in both the message and the messenger while remaining impartial. Today, I am also announcing the Critical Election Incident Public Protocol. The protocol establishes a simple, clear, and impartial process to inform Canadians of a threat to the integrity of the 2019 federal election. It is designed to avoid the kind of gridlock that could prevent an effective public announcement. The core responsibility for the protocol resides in a group of senior civil servants. Let me be clear, this is not about refereeing the election. This is about alerting Canadians of an incident that jeopardizes their rights to a free and fair election. If something happens during the campaign, Canadians will be able to trust that the right people have decided to make it public, that the information is accurate, and that the announcement is not partisan in nature. Because this issue rises beyond partisan considerations. If the group determines that the threshold has been met, the clerk of the Privy Council will direct the head of the relevant security agency to notify Canadians of the incident. It is important that Canadians trust the purpose of the protocol and the decisions made by the senior group of public servants will be made in an impartial manner. Our hope is that such a public announcement never happens, but it is essential that we inform Canadians now of a structure in place to keep them informed and engaged. We are adapting to new realities from a position of strength. The measures announced today will bridge gaps that this evolving environment creates. Together, we are working hard to prepare for a free, fair, and secure 2019 federal election so that we can continue to uphold the trust and confidence that Canadians have in our democracy. My colleagues and I welcome your questions. Merci.
I'm not sure which one of you would like to handle this, but Mr. Goodale, you talked about bots in the United States and false information about Angela Merkel. Can you give us an idea what kind of incidents could happen here that would prompt the Canadian government to alert Canadians in the middle of a campaign? Could you just give us an idea?
Karina will answer.
Yeah, so thank you very much for the question. And one of the things that's important is that the threshold for alerting the public needs to be high. It needs to be something that is compromising the ability for a free and fair election to take place. However, over the past 2 years, we have learned from incidents around the world, specifically in allied countries like the United States or France, as to what kinds of incidents those would be. And of course, they would be context dependent, but this protocol is put in place to ensure that having learned from the experiences of our allies, that we can act swiftly here in Canada.
Anyway, I'll ask my next question, but I was hoping for some examples. I'm assuming they're similar to what has been mentioned. Your documentation calls about malicious foreign actors seek to undermine our democratic societies and institutions. Who might they be?
So as we have seen around the world, there have been incidents of foreign state actors that have tried to manipulate public discourse during an election. What's important to note is that our government is prepared to defend Canadian democracy. Ultimately, what we're talking about today is ensuring that when a Canadian walks into a ballot booth, when they mark their ballot, that they are making their decision based on the information that is out there, and we as a government are providing the tools and the information that they need to make an informed choice. Ultimately, it's Canadians who are deciding the outcome of the election, and our job as a government is to make sure that they have the tools and resources to make those decisions.
Alex Boudelier, Toronto Star.
Mr. Gould, I'm wondering, one of the sort of weakest links in this sort of ecosystem is the news media itself. I'm wondering if you have undertaken any outreach to publishers, to executives at major networks, to discuss the possibility of foreign actors attempting to leak them information.
So thank you for that question. I think it's very important because obviously the media has an incredibly important role to play in protecting our democracy, and without a strong fourth estate or fifth estate, we don't have, a robust democracy here in Canada. One of the things that happened in the fall was the NATO Strategic Communications Centre came to Parliament Hill and offered a session for the Parliamentary Hill Press Gallery. It was not as well attended as one might have expected. There were some members who did come, and I think that was a good first step. Given their experience, they have asked NATO Stratcom to come back, and they have done really good work with journalists throughout NATO countries, and I would obviously encourage journalists, news outlets to engage with them on best practices in other countries, particularly our allied countries, because the media does play such an important role when it comes to how Canadians consume information.
In terms of the high threshold for the protocol group to warn Canadians, in France it was fake emails, but in the U.S. it was real emails. At what level does with the protocol raise questions about a leak? If it's real information, does that make a difference, whether the information is real or whether it's fake or a mix of both? Does that make a difference?
So it will be context dependent, and what's important to note is that it could be one event or it could be a culmination of a series of events, and it will be up to this group of highly respected civil servants to make that decision. It will be based on information and evidence provided by the security agencies, and what's important is we as a government have asked for it to be 5 individuals so that it will be consensus based and it will be discussed in order to alert the public. Cyber threats can come in many different forms, and some of them may be very low level and not have a great impact, and some may be greater, and we want to ensure that the gravity of announcing something to the public is taken into consideration as well.
It was made clear at the briefing that right now this is a caretaker approach during elections. Right now the burden is on ministers, on the government to warn Canadians of anything. Are you, any of your 3, aware of people or groups currently getting ready to influence the election, and if so, who?
So we are a member of the G7, of NATO, of the Five Eyes. It would be naive of us to assume that we are not a target for a cyber attack. That being said, we are constantly monitoring, and as my colleague can comment, but the CSE will be coming up with an update to its cyber report in the coming weeks and months, and we look forward to receiving that, and that will be made publicly available.
Thank you for taking our questions. Minister Gould, could you